CASAT Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to Season 4 of CASAT Conversations. I am your host, Heather Haslam. This season, we will explore the impact of trauma on those who work in human services. You'll hear from researchers, authors, and people with lived experience. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. Today we are joined by Dr. Joyce Mikal-Flynn. Dr. Joyce is an expert in resilience and trauma care, and she's the author of Anatomy of a Survivor. Welcome, Dr. Joyce. We're so happy to have you here today.
Oh, I'm super happy to be here. Thank you so much.
All right, so as we get started, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about yourself and kind of how you came to write this book.
Well, it all basically started, I'll just go back to let you know that clinically I am a nurse practitioner. And I'll kind of go back and what even got me interested in all this content and what I do in terms of trauma research and especially building resilience and post-traumatic growth. So many, many years ago, over like 30 years ago, I had a very significant event. I died and required 22 minutes of CPR to come back to life. At that time, I already was a nurse practitioner. So I had a bachelor's in nursing and was a nurse practitioner. So I had some background, obviously, in medicine and understanding what was going on. It was a, nice Sunday. I have zero memory of any of this. We were at a big swim meet with our children. There was a fun adult meet. I grabbed my husband, for an adult relay, grabbed my husband and a couple of other people, said, we're going to swim this and we're going to win this. And I'm going to swim the last leg because I'm the fastest. And again, have zero memory of any of this. But I finished at the side of the pool that was 13 feet deep. And once I finished, I just sunk to the bottom. They realized I wasn't coming up. My husband dove to the bottom of the pool to get me to the side. And very luckily, there were several children there and their parents. There were 2 emergency room physicians and a cardiac nurse specialist. So I received 22 minutes of CPR at poolside. I was then life flighted to the hospital. My heart stopped again. They got it going. And that's when I ended up in an ICU and life changed for me dramatically. But to really edit it down as to over these 3 decades why I ended up doing this work, it really generated from that event because as I was coming back to life, when I was trying to re-enter life, I obviously had a lot of issues. Physically, I was absolutely fatigued all the time, but I could do things. Emotionally, I was a wreck. And cognitively, I had a lot of delays because of the extended CPR. But one of the things that frustrated me and became more depressing than anything was constantly being told what I couldn't do anymore. So when I would ask physicians, well, when will I run again? Oh, you're never going to run again. When will I swim? You won't do that. When can I go? We don't know. And there was just not a lot of guidance toward, wait a second, nobody even mentioned, this is 30 years ago, but nobody even mentioned TBI to me. Nobody even went into the brain injury I had. So it wasn't overnight, but it was over time as I was crawling back from this very deep, dark, depressing hole of, wait a second, I had this big life before. I was, a nurse practitioner, mother of 3, marathon runner, triathlon, all sorts of stuff, and that had all stopped. And I wasn't really given much guidance or hope for a future. So over time, I just basically rehabbed myself in a lot of ways, found a cardiologist who was a runner who got me into cardiac rehab. I did go to speech therapy because of the extreme aphasia that I had, and that helped. I went back to University of California, Davis, where I received my NP a nurse practitioner, and I just would ask, can I sit in class again? And I just kind of dug myself out of this hole. But it generated over time this incredible desire or this passion to look at these situations and say, we need to do a better job here, people. You can't just keep telling people what they can't do. As I said to one of the physicians who first saw me, a cardiologist, and kept telling me all negative things, I said, okay, you need to stop doing that. I I am living what I can't do. I'm super aware of that. What I need from you is you need to tell me what I can do. You need to ask me what I want to do, and your job is to get me there. So it really, came about that after I did resume a life and I went back to seeing patients, and I would see patients in my practice, or I would read a book or see a movie, and you'd see people who went through horrible situations. And not overnight, but over time, they not only survived, but they thrived. And not in spite of what happened, but as a direct result of that. So I did after my event, my accident here, I actually earned my master's, and I took stories of people who had survived death events because I was very curious. Had they gone through the same things that I had gone through with the emotional trauma and the depression and all the things that they went through? Well, it was a great study, won a nice award for that, and kind of just set things aside for a while. But as I was going on in my practice and in my life, I was just almost overwhelmed, almost obsessed, seeing patients or reading things about people who had gone through horrible things and again, not only survived but thrived. And I wanted to learn more about that. I was fascinated by how did that happen? So I was sitting around with some colleagues one time and I said, I don't like the word rehab. It's way small. It just connotates you go back to baseline. People blow past that all the time. So I created, with the help of some colleagues, this word meta, going beyond, moving beyond, and habilitation, restoration. So I created the word metahabilitation, or Metahab for short. And then once my children were kind of grown and moving on, I decided to go back to school to study this Metahab in earnest. And so I received my doctorate looking at metahabilitation not only as a theory, almost a philosophy, but how could I apply this? And so I did my doctoral research and I identified stages that people go through. So I'll identify, like, if you know the stages of death and dying, there are stages. I identify 6 stages that people go through with Metahab, and also what I term facilitating conditions and characteristics. And so I have now applied that um, clinical pathway in a variety of settings, from cancer patients to veterans to spinal cord injuries to most recently, I've been working with women who experience domestic violence and sex trafficking. I do a lot with first responders, police, those secondary nurses. I just finished a huge piece of work with ICU nurses, respiratory ICU nurses who had gone through the COVID situation, which was just incredible what they'd gone through. So, anyway, that's basically in a nutshell how it started and where it's gone. And finally, I mean, I'm a professor at Sac State, and I created a course that people try every semester to sign up for, even if they can't get in, wait to the next semester, called Traumatology: An Introduction to Post-Traumatic Growth. So
Awesome. What a powerful story, really, from your own personal experience and coming back from 22 minutes of death. I mean, that is really incredible. And then how it's fueled so much of your life's work since then.
That's a nice way to put it. I like that, how it's fueled that. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah.
I'd love for you to kind of outline the 6 stages of Metahab for our listeners.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, so and while I'm saying this, it would be really wonderful if you, as you listened, thought about not necessarily a significant trauma, but maybe an adversity or a challenge that you went through, and see if you, in fact, can identify moving through stages like this. So, stage one, I called the acute trauma. So, stage one is it just happened to you. And that could be you're in the hospital. That could be, anybody just it is the here and now. Don't look too far in the future. Just look at the here and now. What do I need to get through today? What do I need to get through tomorrow? This is the focus of the acute part of it. Stage two, I call turning point. And that is while you're going through your acute traumatic challenge or trauma or adversity, whatever you want to call it, you definitely can hear in people's stories over and over that they don't necessarily know exactly precisely how they're going to get moved forward. They're not sure of how they're going to do it, but they have made the critical decision that I am going to move forward. And once they make that decision, once they make that powerful decision of, I don't like what happened, I'm not going to focus on that, I'm going to focus on moving forward, then they get into what I call stage three, is treatment modalities. And these can be complementary, traditional treatments. This is where families, especially, families and adjunct, friends and family really help in stage one, two, and three. But they come together and they look at a variety of different treatments or ideas about how to take care of things, what you want to do. And it's a very busy stage for people. It's very, whether physical therapy, emotional therapy, going diet, whatever. There's a lot that goes on. Once they kind of get some traction moving forward, stage four is a reflective stage. That's adaptation and adjustment for now. You don't have to do it forever, but for now, it's kind of like, take a breather. Think about this. What happened? What's happening now? How did you deal with it? What helped? Are there obstacles? You really need to take some time to just make some adjustments and think about what you need to do. And then stage five is return to life. You got to get back into life some way, somehow. It may not be what you experienced before. It may be something different. I cannot tell you how many times I have interviewed people, and this doesn't happen overnight. Again, this is a journey that they go through, where a door has been closed, but they then reflect and go, but a much more interesting door opened up that I never would have considered had I not had this shut. There may be different ways that you go into the work that you do on your own, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But you do get back into life. And again, it may not be the same, but you have to move. Stage six is the final stage, but that is a never-ending stage, and I call it Metahab. It's the moving past. This is something you have now developed, a mindset, a way of organizing your thinking and your practice around adversities, even challenges or trauma, that you get back into the system and you work it and you move forward. And this could be a ways down the road, but you look back and you reflect, you didn't want this to happen. This isn't something you planned, but in an amazing way, it made you who you are. It gave you insight into life that had you not had this, you would not have recognized it. It built your inner strength. You now see yourself not from a position of weakness, but from a position of strength. And again, you go back and forth through these stages, but you never, especially when you try new things, you never go back to the absolute horrible, this has been, I can't get out of this stage. You may live there for a little bit, but you move forward quickly because you've adopted this mindset that I am going to focus on my strengths. I'm going to focus on what I can do. I'm going to focus on day to day if that's what it caused, but I am going to manipulate. I'm going to create my future.
That's awesome. As I, listened to you and you invited us to really think about different things that have happened in our own life, I can think of small t traumas in my life, really, where I can see these stages. And, I don't think any trauma is something that we, like you said, we rehab and get back to an old self. We're really moving forward and integrating what we're learning into our current self. And it sounds like Metahab really kind of encompasses that.
Super well said. Really well said. One of the things that I strive for as I work with people, first of all, I will tell you, when I work with groups, mostly I'm working with groups, I never stage them. I never identify their characteristics or their facilitating conditions. I invite them to do that because they know where they're at. And then they can, because what I want Metahab to be doing and what I have seen it successfully doing is to really uncover, and this is a Joseph Campbell thing, but uncover the hero within, to uncover these strengths that people think, well, I didn't know I had that. I didn't know I could do that. And as they focus on, well, again, the possibilities and what they can do, utilizing their past history of trauma and adversity to inform them with regard to their strength. It's very, and this isn't big word, it's kind of an overused word, but it's a good word. It's really used to empower, to really self-actualize, to really get in there and see that. And let me also remind people, when I work with people and I work with organizations or whatever, I never minimize or trivialize what has happened. I honor the trauma. This is not something you get over. I make that clear. There's no getting over a lot of this stuff. You learn over time how to use it. You learn how to use it, and as you've said, incorporate it into your life's journey thing. But we don't want this to be defining us. How we fell is in our definition. How we rose is how we define ourselves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I know you've really spent a lot of time with trauma survivors. I'm curious if you can share some of the commonalities that you found within your research.
Well, one of the things, again, that really comes back to my initial research, where as I had this idea of the term and the philosophy of Metahab, I didn't really understand the stages or the patterns that happen until I talked to or heard hundreds of stories, because my work is not coming out of my head. This is from people who told me this is what they did, and I just provided language and a structure around it. But one of the things that I can tell you in general that you see or I hear about, when I talk to people and I go, just tell me your story. Just don't worry about just tell me your story. And as they're telling me their story, I'll hear certain things and certain patterns of behavior. One for sure is, even if it's a sliver of hope, somebody helped them or they held on to even a sliver of hope in terms of what their life could be. Secondly, This is so key. And I talk to people about this a lot. When, I was going through my thing, I was so, headstrong. I grew up in a family where I was the oldest daughter and I just was used to doing things and I just plowed through and I just did things. Well, this was bigger than anything I had ever dealt with. And what I noted in myself and have seen in others is when people are aware that they need to ask for and accept help, they do better. Now, you want to ask for the right help. You want to be clear about that. But when they ask for and accept help, they do better. When they focus on possibilities, when they get into this notion of what can I do and kind of build a strategy around that, they get a game plan. And I go, hey, people, game on here. You got goals here. So they start to recognize a goal for here and now, medium-sized goals and long-term goals. And they stick with that. And they work in that way to strategize around that. And they bring people in who are positive and optimistic for them to help them with that. And it's really one of the things too that's really important to do is to, get your people, get your team. And it isn't because your team's always telling you you're great, you're great, you're great. They can give you honest opinions about where they see things. And especially sometimes we don't realize our day-to-day, productions, things that we do well. So when somebody doesn't see us for a couple weeks or a month, they'll go, oh my gosh, look at you. Do you realize what you're doing now? So it's good to have that around. The other thing that is absolutely clear is people find a purpose. They find a reason to keep going. Now, we can call that motivation, but I always tell people those motivations change over time, right? The motivation for me to come back is different when I first had my situation because of my children, my husband, what I want to do. The motivation for me now is different. But you isolate, you identify a motivation, a purpose, a reason to come back. So when I see that and hear that in people, I always say, yeah, you're going to do okay. You're going to do okay. Because people who talked about what you do, they've done okay. So stick with it. You're on the right track. Again, looking over small things that embracing, even small things that you've done well and move forward, looking at that, and then guiding you forward. And really, you got to be around people who will challenge, who will support you, but also challenge you. People who did that will say, well, why don't you? I'll just give you as an example. I always love this example. So my colleague, Dr. Bridget Parsh, super good friend, great colleague. And when she's always been very supportive of the work I did. So when I finished my dissertation, she goes, oh my gosh, this is so great. You need to write a book. Now, this is my first book. My second book is Anatomy of a Survivor, but my first book is Turning Tragedy into Triumph. And it's subtitled Metahabilitation, a Contemporary Model of Rehabilitation. And I said, yeah, I'll write it. And every week she'd come to me, did you write that book? How are you going on that book? Yeah, I'm going to do it. So finally, about a month or so later, she sat me down. She said, did you get that? Have you started that book? I said, Bridget, I don't know if I'm a good writer. I don't know if I'm smart enough to do this. I don't know if I could do it. And she looked at me and said, okay, first of all, you are smart enough to do this. You are a good writer and you need to do this. Second of all, you're really annoying. You're super annoying going into all the obstacles and everything. And she said, you found out some information people need to know. So you need to put this down on paper and let people know this is a way out and a way up after stuff happens. So you need to have people like Dr. Bridget Parsh around.
We in one of our previous episodes for this season, we interviewed a woman named Beverly Kyer who writes about compassion fatigue. and she shared with us the importance of having an accountability partner in your life, a colleague who really will call you out on these types of things. And we were talking about it in the concept of really watching out for each other when we are maybe doing too much, or in this case, maybe not, living to our full potential or doing the things that, are going to make an impact because of the work we've been doing. But that sense of having an accountability partner seems to be ringing true through many of our conversations.
Yeah.
So I
Cool.
love
Oh,
that.
I love that.
So I know much of your research really focuses on post-traumatic growth. Please share with us how you think about this important trauma concept.
Well, let me just, I always love to give credit where credit is due. So the term post-traumatic growth was coined by two psychologists from University of North Carolina, Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun. And they had several iterations of it before they landed on post-traumatic growth. They identified domains. They have 5 domains that are centered around post-traumatic growth. So I look at Metahab. I have structured it in a way that Metahab is a pathway, a strength-based clinical pathway that can over time lead one forward to a productive recovery and encourage post-traumatic growth. So when I look at that, or think about how to do that, that's kind of the end game, or we kind of look at that as an end game in terms of the notion of post-traumatic growth. It's amazing to me when I just actually was at a resiliency conference recently, and a national resiliency conference. And I asked people, who knows about PTG? Who knows about post-traumatic growth? And there wasn't one hand that was raised. And so even though people have identified that and noted it in themselves, when you start talking about it, they don't see that, or they don't hear that as a regular thing that comes forward with regard to care. So I'd like to change that. And I am changing that. Even when you look at the literature, is pretty clear about trauma-informed care, or, when we're getting into healthcare physicians, first responders, that this kind of ideology needs to be incorporated during our training period. My son-in-law is an emergency room physician, and I've talked to him a lot about this. And I was just so touched when he said, I just wish when I was in medical school, somebody would have started to talk to us about this. He said, I wouldn't have probably remembered everything, but I would have remembered what this concept's about, and start to think about, hey, do I want longevity in my career? How will I get this? It's never a question of if you're going to be faced with this, or, it's when it happens and how much of it. And so going into, as you said, the compassion, wellness programming, thinking about how your job can bring forth post-traumatic growth, looking at what it gives you, not what it takes away. So really incorporating this from the beginning of your training, and/or your academic didactic work, and it should actually be interspersed throughout your professional life, because again, we just need to be reminded of this, because especially some of the work people have been into recently with the COVID crisis and everything, it took its toll. And so recognizing how you can adjust, adapt, make some changes, incorporate practices that are going to promote your healing and over time your growth are really important.
Yeah, what strikes me about that is, I'm thinking of the medical model that's really focused on symptoms and deficits. And so much of the work in trauma, right, is focused on symptoms and deficits. And okay, what's our treatment model to fix this? And really, it sounds like Metahab is a much more holistic approach in saying, yes, this happened. And how are you going to move forward, and that there's several pieces involved in that.
Oh my gosh, that is so perfect. And I have been pushing, I used to say a rock, now I say a boulder up a hill to try and gain this awareness because we do like to focus on what has gone wrong. And here's what over time, I've really obviously thought a lot of things through, gotten a lot of input from people, and structured my thinking and my approach around this. And so, what I say to people is, um, like, for example, with grief and depression or whatever's going negatively, that is a real thing. I used to say I want to normalize this process, but I stopped using that word and I use the word instead, I expect. When at the beginning part, I expect you to be undone. I expect you to be, and that aspect needs to be treated. But I'm going to come back and get you because we can't leave you there. We now need to move forward with what it is you have. So the awareness of what has been taken away and what needs to be dealt with is there. A very interesting concept that really resonated with me with regard to what you just said was, if you know about Dr. Hugh Herr, Herr, he is forget, I can't remember now where he went to med school, but he's got an engineering degree from MIT. He is a double amputee from a climbing accident many, many, many years ago. And he was given prosthesis that just were like, he goes, what am I supposed to do with these? He was a young man. And so he wanted to learn more about better ways to do prosthesis. And so he went back to medical school and MIT, and he's amazing in the prosthesis that he does now. But he also incorporated in his work an orthopedic surgeon, because what they had identified is that when people are doing amputations, they're basically using pretty much the same techniques as we did during the Civil War. And they went, wait a second. I think we need to figure out a better way of doing amputations. And so we can utilize these updated prostheses to keep as much of any of the neural pathways you have there, any of the connections you have, anything you can do so it can interface with these prostheses. Now, this is way above what I can talk about here, but it just made me think, oh my gosh, that's exactly right. We have to have a better way of dealing with things from the get-go, because we need to establish pathways that people are going to need to reconnect with from that time. Again, it's a bad thing. Things are bad. You need grief work, you need to, all that's there. I get that. But we need to establish a better way of dealing with this from the moment that it occurs so that we can establish ongoing productive mechanisms to utilize as you move through your healing, recovery, and growth journey.
Yeah, I love that. And it makes me think of, I like that it honors that, yeah, it is hard, and whatever happened, it acknowledges whatever happened, and that person had whatever their experience is around that, right? That's going to look different for many people. But some things, there's that like toxic positivity that I
Oh,
sort of
yes.
think about,
Yes.
and like, well, we learned from this and now we're going to move forward. But your metahabilitation is not about that toxic
No.
positivity and it's all going to be okay. It really is just a framework for or identifying the different stages that a person goes through when they've experienced trauma.
And I really appreciate you saying that, because that term came up a while, yeah, a couple years ago, and I again had to kind of think that through. But let me be very clear. This is tough stuff. And there are times when you're moving on in your life, but then something hits you again, or something throws you off course, or something happens. But what I want to reassure people with Metahab is, again, that notion of, okay, before I move on, I need to get some help here. And that could be emotional, psychological help. That could be other types of rehab. That could be other types of spiritual help, or whatever. This is not a one-way journey. And the more you move forward, the more you realize about what it is that can not only help you move forward, but how to engage more productively with obstacles that come about, because they are going to be there. The other thing I always like to tell people too is, real quick, you better recognize that just because you went through one thing doesn't mean other stuff's not going to happen. So hopefully getting this ideology around this will help you as you encounter other things that occur in your life.
Yeah, and it speaks to the layers of trauma and that lifespan development, right? Like if I've looked at something and healed a trauma from childhood, say in college, and then now, I'm married and having a child, this life stage looks different versus children out of high school and becoming, your parent or your children have launched, then that's a new stage of life. And I feel like each time we go through these stages of life, things are unearthed from that past that sometimes we have to look at. And so
Oh
it
yeah.
really is a journey throughout our lives.
It's so great that yeah, well, and the other thing though too, it's so great you talk about that, because as you go through this, and there's been times that you have been kind of thrown off, and then times of super appreciation as you go through those life events too, because as you see your children graduate, or we've seen our children get married, you just stop and think, wow, that's amazing that I'm here. It wasn't easy
Hmm.
getting here, but it's amazing that I'm here. So you don't realize that until you go through those things. The other thing, and I don't like to use this word a lot, but there are things also that can trigger you into remembering how tough that was. And a very important concept that I learned as I was writing my book, Anatomy of a Survivor, and was able to talk to actually Dr. Richard Tedeschi about. So there's a chapter in there about post-traumatic growth. It is very important also to recognize that trauma and growth are not separate. They can live together. So, because I can get, even talking to you now, I can get emotional about what has happened. It doesn't mean that I haven't grown. They live together. Those
Hmm.
memories are stuck very deeply in your hippocampus. But I just like to reassure people, you're going to feel that. But that doesn't mean at all that you have not understood life in a very important way and moved forward in a very productive, provocative way.
Hmm. Yeah, and that those traumas live in our bodies and they come out periodically. So you mentioned that you've done a lot of work with first responders and nurses, and so much of this season is really focused on secondary trauma and vicarious trauma. And would love to hear how your program really supports people in the helping fields.
Well, one of the things that I've been trying to promote, and I did this actually having my class at Sac State, Traumatology and Introduction to Post-Traumatic Growth, is because most of the people in that class are, criminal justice majors, social work, psych, nursing, PT, all sorts of that. So that's really good so that they can build that awareness around what they do. The other thing, so again, in any other kind of training work, I try to build in a piece of this work into their education as they go through. It has been absolutely humbling to work with people who have been through what they have been through. And I hear this over and over again from them. Nobody has brought this forward to us in this way. Nobody has structured a, a pathway in this way so that we can start to understand, again, not only what these situations did to us, but what these situations can do for us. And so that's in the secondary and vicarious trauma. People kind of use those interchangeably, but they're a little bit different. And because one's more an acute thing and one's more over time, you experience that. But the work that I've done with them has been amazing. And it has, when I hear back from them, this, taking Metahab courses has made me want to go back to work, or I don't miss work anymore, or I'm more into what I'm doing. It also, the thing that has been most comforting but most amazing to me is to see how they have come together as a group. And so, as an example, nursing managers or with staff nurses have come together as a group and realized how they can empower each other, and their group can be manifesting that strength. So they'll do different things at the beginning of each shift, kind of like, you know, uh, athletes do it before a game. They come together and they do a huddle and they'll say something positive, whatever. They come up with their own ideas because I never tell them what to do. I say, what do you want to do? And they come up with these great ideas. One of probably the most powerful things that came through, especially I work with over 30 nurses, respiratory ICU nurses and their managers. At the end of using the Metahab program with their organization, they said the thing that was most that I became most aware of was their shared humanity. That they connected with each other. Not just this opened up some discourse with these professionals who had worked together, but it didn't just talk about what they had done professionally, but it opened up them to feel comfortable about talking about things that happened in their life, in general in their life. And they realized that they may not have had the same types of adversity or challenges or trauma, but they appreciated, man, people are coming to work and they've carried some heavy loads from before. And so I didn't use this term. They used the term of what came together as a shared humanity, and it brought them closer to their understanding of each other and their appreciation and their ability to support each other as they went through their shift. And that's some stuff that you kind of hope would come through. But when you hear it in reality, I went, wow, I'm so happy they saw that.
Yeah, that's huge. And, as we've been recording all of these episodes for this season, something that just keeps coming to my mind really is actually even just thinking about a title is maintaining our humanity while responding to trauma. Because that's really what this is, as far as um, how do I honor the impact of the work that I do, and how do I move forward? And to me, it boils down to that maintaining our humanity, which is not always easy.
So I absolutely just underscore, I'm like shaking my head. People can't see that. Yes, yes, yes. So it's how you honor that. But also, I think, how do you move forward, but put a little piece in the middle. How do you honor that? How do you incorporate it? How do you use that specifically to build your resilience and growth? One of the other things I just want to bring forward again, and this came through when I was writing my book and looking at this, is in order to experience post-traumatic growth over time, to understand those dimensions, one must engage with the adversity, challenge, or trauma. An engagement has to happen. So it doesn't just occur independently. You can't just wake up and go, oh, that happened. That's why Metahab is fashioned so perfectly, because it creates a way to purposefully or productively engage with what happened. So let me just use an example. If you want to get stronger biceps, you can't just sit around hoping it'll happen or thinking it'll happen or guessing it'll happen. You have to actually get in the gym or do what you need to do to engage with the process that will strengthen those biceps. So you think about, post-traumatic growth and engagement with the process as, like a resiliency post-traumatic growth gym. Like you got to get in there and engage with things. You got to go at it. But the thing that happens with people when they go at it is they realize it isn't as scary as they thought. They have the ability to go at it. And once they do, they come out of it going, wow, okay, I kind of think I got this part. So that's a very important part. So it's the recognize, doing it, but that mid part has to be the engagement or utilization of what has happened. And then you recognize that.
I'm getting this funny image in my mind about like the monsters under our bed when we're children. Right? There's like, it's so scary to look under that bed. And then you look and it's not as bad as we thought it was.
There's a book that I love reading by Chris McDougall. I'll just say this, and I'm a runner, so I love this. And it's called not Born to Run. I think is not by Chris McDougall. And there's a woman in there who's an ultra runner, like she runs 100-milers, 200-mile ultra. And she, as you said, looking under the bed, she talks about encountering the beast. So when she goes out to run, when she encounters the beast, she recognizes that she has pushed herself, that she's pushed herself. So she's encountering this beast. But she says, over time, I've come to not love, but I appreciate encountering the beast, because that makes me know I push myself. And the more I encounter the beast and the more I'm challenged by that, the better I get at dealing with the beast. So the more I'm at it, the better the better I can do. So it's not going away from it, it's going into it. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I can see that. Um, will you give us a quick snapshot of the Metahab program for our listeners?
okay, there's a couple ways I put it together, and I'd really love if organizations would love to incorporate this, but I do two basic things that go on. Number one, there's the training to certify you in utilizing the Metahab process. And that I use for a variety of people, clinicians, therapists, whoever wants to, social workers or whatever. So there's about a 30 to 40-hour training that I do so that they can utilize Metahab within their existing practice. Let me just also make sure I tell people this is not, I don't like to get rid of what you've already done. What you've already done is great. This is an adjunct to your current practice. Then I also do a separate program that I do hybrid, can do online or whatever, but it is to work with people, taking them through the Metahab stages on their own. So one is really working with, managers, administrative, whatever, and utilizing that on an organizational level to incorporate that. And then another one can be more person to person, where I don't do therapy. I'm not a therapist, but I engage them in the Metahab practice. And I do this through a hybrid and or online program that they can sign up for. So, yeah.
And do you offer that in groups, or is that purely individual?
I know I like to do this, I like to do this more in groups, but I have, because people have been wanting to do this more. I'm established and I'm just about ready to publish it, but I'd like to do an online Metahab program that takes people through the stages. Again, I'm not a therapist. Don't try and do that. It's used in conjunction with other therapies. I also have, as you mentioned, my most recent book is Anatomy of a Survivor. People can purchase that book. Within that book is the Metahab system and how to use it. There's a whole unit on that, but it also incorporates a lot of the science behind the neurobiology of trauma care and how happiness, gratitude. I talk about genetics and epigenetics and why that's good. So that's a very complete book. My first book, Turning Tragedy into Triumph, also takes people through the 6 stages of Metahab, and I like to use that in conjunction. I have a workbook specifically for survivors. I have a workbook for family and friends, and then obviously there's clinician work, but I keep that within the context of the certification training.
Very cool. Well, we'll make sure all those are included in the show notes for today so people can find you.
Perfect.
So,
Perfect.
as we wrap up, is there anything else that you feel is important for our listeners to know or understand?
I think just in general, like I always like to wrap this up. We are all way stronger than sometimes we are given credit for, or we give ourselves credit for. I think with what's happened in the past, especially in the last few years, decade, I like, again, I get it's important to understand the crisis and what has happened, but I almost don't want to miss this opportunity for us to also learn how we have come through this. And these situations are precisely situations that can build our resilience and our strength. Not overnight again, but over time. And as I talk to when I meet my students, and they're all worried about certain things, grade, or some of them have way more other cares and issues that they're worried about. And I just say, tell me your story. And when I listen to people's stories, my final thing is all, you got this. Do you not understand how amazing you are? You got this. So that's probably a message I would like to leave for everybody. We go through things, we struggle, we fall. Sometimes we have our finest hour, sometimes we don't. But we do have the capacity and the ability, not only, as my tagline is with Metahab, not only to survive, but adapt and finally amaze. And that's what the message I'd like to leave.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Joyce, for being with us today and sharing all that you've learned throughout your journey. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to CASAT Conversations, your resource for exploring behavioral health topics. We hope you found today's conversation timely and meaningful. Please share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. If you want to learn more, visit us at our blog at CASATOnDemand.org.
CASAT Podcast Network. This podcast has been brought to you by the CASAT Podcast Network, located within the Center for the Application of Substance Abuse Technologies at the University of Nevada, Reno. For more podcasts, information, and resources, visit CASAT.org.